Welcome everybody to the 21st episode of the Invest This podcast. I am your host, Scott Bauer, and today we have Jeff Greenberg on. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing fantastic today.
Sounds like you are, or looks like you're sitting in a car. Where are you at?
Yeah, I'm at my granddaughter's soccer game.
So this is the definition of multitasking.
There you go.
Well, glad that you could be here with us today. A little bit of background that I know, and I'll let him take over, is Jeff is an apartment investor, and I'm sure there's a lot more detail to it than that. And so, Jeff, why don't you give the listeners a little bit more about your background and what you're focused on now?
Well, as you said, I'm a multifamily investor. We're also doing student housing. We're also looking some into senior living as well. But most of our focus right now is on the student housing area.
Okay.
We do syndicate the deals and bring in investors to share in the profits.
And how long have you been doing that for?
I've been doing this for about 10 years now.
Okay. And you primarily, multifamily, but student housing wise, do you have a specific location that you like best, or are you kind of all over the place, wherever the best, opportunities are at?
We're looking all over the place. We do like the southeast.
Okay.
But the main thing is wherever there's a major university.
Okay.
And we like to be close to the university. So, there's thousands of universities around the state.
Okay.
Around the country, excuse me.
So you've been doing it for 10 years. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. Where'd you start? Did you jump in 100-unit apartment complex, first deal, syndicated it, had it all come out equal and simple?
No, that didn't happen. The first one we did as leads, it was a 20-unit property.
Okay.
It was actually 5 fourplexes. That was in Harlingen, Texas, which is a pretty small little town, and everything went well. Didn't go as well as we had hoped it would. The problem was it was a 2007 property. We bought in 2010. It was 100% occupied. We just didn't realize that we didn't leave ourselves much room to grow, and it didn't.
Yeah.
So, steady Eddie, but it didn't give us any kicker at the end.
Yep. So when you're buying properties now, are you buying properties that are in a distressed situation, or do you like to buy cash flowing properties that have room for growth? What does that look like?
Both. We look for stress. We love the properties that have management stress.
Yep.
And then you don't even have to worry that much about deferred maintenance. But then again, we also like the properties that have some type of deferred maintenance or some kind of issue that's causing them problems.
Definitely.
And if we could come in and fix that issue, that's great.
So when you say management stress, obviously across the country, you invest across the country. Any market that has the opportunity there?
Right now, we're invested in Ohio. We're invested in Georgia. We're invested in Arizona. We're pretty opportunistic. If a deal comes, we take a good look at the market and decide if that's one we want to be in.
Okay.
But we're pretty open. But our focus mainly is Southeast.
Okay. So Arizona, that's where I'm at. I'm in Arizona. This market is very, very fun, so to speak. Right now, it's been a good run. And on a multifamily side, I'm actively looking for deals. We're looking for acquisitions on multifamily properties, and I'm closing on some smaller ones here in the next couple of weeks. But as far as the larger ones go, there's kind of a big difference between the A-class properties and the B and C-class properties, which is where we see a lot of opportunity, especially in emerging or growing areas here in Phoenix. But how long have you been here? How long have you been investing here?
Tucson, we just bought in Tucson, and we closed on that one at the end of December. So that's very recent.
Okay.
And that's not a big property. Right now, as you know, there's a lot of difficulties finding the decent sized properties and the good deals. Mm-hmm. So in the meantime, we're settling for a few smaller diamonds, and one of them that we found in Tucson was a 100-bed property
Okay.
near the University of Arizona in Tucson.
Okay. That's what you closed on in December?
We closed that in December. We closed that one on the end of December.
Okay. So talk to me a little bit about, when you say smaller deals, smaller gems, what is a small deal to you? What is a large deal to you?
Well, anything under 100 we consider a small deal. But so with this 20 unit, with the student housing, we like to get over 200 beds.
Okay.
This one happens to be 100 beds, which is pretty small. We have another 144 bed in Georgia. But that one was under extreme stress. We actually bought that from the note holder. That was 48% occupied. It was foreclosed on.
Okay.
And that one's turning out to be a phenomenal deal.
So, what would you say to the listeners that are out there trying to find, the difference between a multifamily deal or a student housing deal? Why would I go at either one? I don't have any experience in the student housing other than when I was in college. I looked around and there's a lot of people that are in the student housing, right? And it's probably a great opportunity, but I'm sure you probably have higher turnover. It's a higher, or maybe not turnover, but higher cost every time it does turnover. Is that the case?
Well, the thing is the higher turnover is the main thing. So far, we haven't seen the higher cost per turnover. It's just that you have more turnover.
Sure.
As far as the damage, we haven't seen that much more damage than we normally would in a normal, property, especially C properties. C properties you typically see more anyway.
Sure.
But it's the turnover, and that's mainly we budget for that.
Okay.
But the additional revenues that you bring in pretty much make up for that, especially since if it's tenant damage from abuse,
they pay for it.
We're taking that out of the deposit anyway.
Yep.
We get that paid back.
Now, we probably should have gone over this from the beginning. How'd you get into real estate and real estate investment to begin with? What were you doing before that?
Well, I was in IT for years, and decided to look into real estate. Started with single family homes in about 2007, which was not a very good time to be getting into to real estate. Period. Everything was dropping faster than we could make offers, and so I got out of the single family and happened to bump into somebody doing multifamily, and got into there. But I heard some guru talking, and kind of followed his lead, and have been doing it since then.
Now, is that guru? This is a shot in the dark, but is that guru named Dave Lindahl by chance?
You're good. Yeah. He was the one that was around. Bigger Pockets wasn't around back then. Joe wasn't around back then. A lot of other people that can help you out just weren't along at that time.
Yeah, and I actually know that just because that's how I started as well. He was a mogul. That was in 2013, I think, when I got into it. So,
okay.
Very, very cool. Really, has a great program. Teaches a lot of people how to do it. At the time, that was really just my segue from being a realtor in single family into thought I was going to buy apartment buildings, and then ended up buying a bunch of single family homes. So that's kind of the difference. But
yep.
So give me a little bit more information about how you transitioned into that. So you were in IT, you bought some single family houses, you met somebody that was like, hey, multifamily is a better deal. How do they sell that to you?
Well, Lindahl does a good job of selling that to me. So I heard him with the extra zeros and also being able to do it with a limited amount of funds. I was in the middle of a divorce at the time and saw, half of my retirement disappearing somewhere, and as well as my personal residence. And, when I looked at the numbers and tried to figure out what I could do with the money I had, it was going to be a slow road. And once we started talking about using other people's money, that excited me. That, I used my money to get into deals and for my education, but pretty much, it was other people's money actually getting the deal done.
Yeah, and I can understand that. So, Jeff, why don't you talk to me just for a little bit about using other people's money? Because for a lot of listeners out there and a lot of people that listen to the show and are looking for information, that's a big fear that they have, is using other people's money. So the first time that you asked somebody for money, or that you used other people's money to buy real estate, what did that look like? How'd the conversation go? What advice would you give to, you know, the investor looking to do that?
The you know the advice. I mean, I was scared stiff. Okay, totally scared stiff. Never raised a penny in my life, and here I was. At the time, we were trying to raise $350,000, and it was scary. It was definitely scary. Talking to people about it, but it ended up that all I needed to do was tell people what I was doing. The thing is as far as the credibility, I was in a deal, a $20 million deal, 700 units, that I was a passive investor in, and that in itself gave me credibility.
Yeah.
People looked at that and they said, "Oh, hey, you're really involved. You know what you're talking about." And so I was able to get people to listen to me, because I was educated, even though I didn't have any experience under my belt. And I had a business partner with me, and so she raised about half of it. I raised the other half. But it was people that we had met on the way. She had a lot of people where it was, people she had worked with, ex-bosses or ex-coworkers. And so we raised that. But most of mine was people I had met from networking.
Definitely. So, I mean, would you say that it was very beneficial for you to have that experience as a passive investor? So that gave you the opportunity where you could see kind of how the deal works. You could see how, the communication goes with the investor once you're in a deal. It sounds to me like that is a really good thing. And maybe for the listeners out there, that might be a good way for them to get involved if they want to get involved, without going to get their own deal first. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And it does, it is good to be able to see how somebody's running the deal. That may be positive or negative, as far as, in my case, a lot of the stuff was, I saw what not to do in a lot of situations, how not to treat investors. But you still get in an education. You've got a ticket to the door. You can ask questions. You can be as inquisitive as you want. Learn about the project. You have a right to. You're an investor, and so you can learn a lot from being there. Even though you're a passive investor, you have a right to ask all the questions you want about what's going on with the deal, about the financials, about budgets, why you doing this, why aren't you doing that? It's a great opportunity, and it adds to your credibility, because now you're in the deal. As I've told people before, that actually gave me credibility with the bank when we were getting the loan, when they found out that we were in a large deal, even though we were a small passive investor in a deal. The lender really liked that.
And kind of another question that I've had on myself, as a passive investor, what kind of tax advantages do you get for that? Is it the same as because you're a limited partner at that point, right?
Yeah, you do get a K1, but you get the benefits of any losses on the property. And so even though you don't directly get the depreciation, the property gets a depreciation, which is a paper loss. And that paper loss is carried forward onto the property not making as much profit, even though they have. And so you could end up getting a negative income. You could get a loss on your income, and it could be a write-off off your taxes. But don't ask me specific on the taxes, because that my SEC attorney always says, don't answer tax questions, send them to their CPAs.
Yeah.
But essentially, the depreciation does affect you. It's just not directly.
Definitely. Well, and that was, I didn't mean to put a tax question on you by any means, but, it was just a question I had pop up right away, because, as a passive investor or a limited partner in a deal, you don't get direct benefit necessarily, but it is indirect. And if you're
it's indirect, yeah.
So, So that was 2007. Now we're here at 2018. What what's next? What's next for you? Or I guess how many doors are you up to now? Are you managing that all yourself? Do you have several general partners involved? Give me a little bit of information there.
We've sold off a lot of our properties mainly because of the market right now, and it was also time. I mean, my Houston deal we actually sold in 3 years. The plan was 5. We sold that one off, but right now we've got mainly some student housing properties that we're going to hang on to for a little while. Depends on what's going on with the market. We're still looking for value add properties, multifamily as well as student housing. I think you asked earlier, we were talking about why student housing. One of the things that we find is it's easier to find student housing properties in stress because a lot of the management companies, if they don't know student housing, it's easy to mess it up.
Yeah.
And so we are finding a lot of that. And a couple of the diamonds that we're working on right now is because of poor management, because of the student housing.
And of course, you would have to have a management company with that experience in order to come in and correct that default, right, or correct that issue.
Right.
So,
right.
So you've spent time not only interviewing, but sounds like you have other deals where you've put management in place. Was it hard to find a management company that's competent enough to get that done, or probably not really?
We've been fortunate that we've been able to find good management that understands student housing. On our one property, which was a small market, a market a lot smaller than I typically would want to be in, it was hard getting the on-site person. The local person, the regional managers were fine because they were all over the area, but getting somebody that was willing to work in a smaller market, and also maintenance, having maintenance personnel in a small market is just hard to find people.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the more difficult part, not so much the student housing part of it.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, moving forward, as you've sold off a lot of your properties, where do you feel like we're at? Obviously, we're at you're selling off stuff. So where do you think the market's at? Where do you see yourself in 2 to 5 years from now? What do you see yourself investing in at that point?
Well, I was just at a conference yesterday and Monday, and they spent a lot of time talking about where we are, and everybody had their opinion as far as where we are. Everybody knows there's market cycles. We just don't know where we are. It could be. I hear people talking another couple years. It could be, 3 years. It could be 4 years. It could be 2 years. The main thing is to protect yourself whenever it decides to come. And we spent a lot of time talking about what people are doing to protect themselves and to making sure, what they're doing, making sure there's enough margins in there in case the downturn comes. There's some people paying some crazy prices for properties, and we're just not going to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got to be safe now, and if we get beat out because of these crazy prices, maybe next year or a couple of years down the road we'll be buying them back when they're in foreclosure or something.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, obviously, I'm sure it's across the board, across the country, but here in Phoenix, we see that crazy numbers. I mean, crazy values for stuff. But, like I said, kind of at the beginning of the call, we still see opportunity in the B and C class property stuff that's in good up and coming areas where it's not a long-term hold necessarily, at least not what we're trying to go after, but more of a short-term, value add type of opportunity, and then sell and get out as quickly as possible. Would you say that's a good idea?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's you got to make sure that you keep. I mean, the big thing is keeping enough money available. Making sure it's a good cash flow. If your rents ended up going down, are you going to be able to survive? One of the things we did on the Georgia property is we paid all cash for it. We bought it for all cash, so we have no debt. So if something happens, and it goes down. Well, we bought it at 48% occupied, so it couldn't go down much more. But it's now we're pre-leased for 97% come August, the August semester. So I would say be careful with leverage. Make sure you have enough funds in reserve. Make sure you could take a little bit of drop in occupancy and in rents. You may not be able to meet your goals and your performance that you want, but at least you're going to survive.
So just be ready to take some punches if you need them. If the market
Absolutely.
throws a couple at you, make sure you're ready for that. So that's a really good transition kind of into our lightning round. You ready for that?
Yep.
Okay. What is your hashtag Investors tip that you can give us to let our listeners keep moving forward?
Decide on what your criteria is and stick by it. Don't fall into the trap of trying to pay asking price. You have to evaluate the property and know what the value is. You can't be sucked into it and paying the price that some of these other people are paying.
Yeah.
You got to know your value.
Yep. Totally understand that. And that's really good advice. Know your numbers. Do you have a favorite book that you've read or continue to read, and what's the impact been?
There's been so many books. I can name the one obviously that got me started, and it probably got most of the people in real estate started. Rich Dad Poor Dad. But there's so many others. The E-Myth is one that I'm always thinking about because I have a group of people working with me, and I'm always remembering to work on the business and have them work in the business. Sometimes I get drug into the details, and I try to keep myself pulled back out to keep the business growing.
Yeah, both are fantastic books. Matter of fact, I've heard the E-Myth be brought up several times, weirdly enough, in the last couple of weeks, and I think it's a sign it's time to read it again.
Yeah, it's a good book.
Of course, you've had mentors, you've had people, coaches, I'm sure, over the years. Who has given you the best advice, and what has the impact been on your life?
Well, Dave Lindahl's given me certainly the basics. I've got a lot from his programs, and I've met a lot of good people from those programs and did a lot of networking. I've been to Joe's events. I think Joe's up at a whole different level. What he's done. I go to a lot of different events that I pick up different pieces at different places. With all the podcasts I listen to, with Joe's podcasts, and I love Old Capital. It's a great podcast. The thing is, you pick up little pieces here and there. Yep. With every different, everybody you go to. I've gone to a lot of syndication boot camps. Gene Trowbridge, the one he's put on, is one of the best. Gene Trowbridge and Jillian Sidoti. She's my SEC attorney. But the main thing is go to different events, go to different programs, listen to podcasts all the time.
So in essence, basically what you're saying is always be learning. Always be learning.
Always. I'm always listening to podcasts. My grandkids hate it, but that's, but they won't hate it so much when they get to inherit, what I'm working on.
There you go. It's benefiting them. Now, with all this and all, everything you've been blessed with so far, how do you like to give back?
I run two different real estate clubs. I spend a lot of time with those. When people call me up, I have no problem sitting there talking to people and trying to help them out. I started a mentoring group that ended up turning into a company that the people that I've mentored are actually working for me now. So that's very rewarding, seeing them grow and seeing them learn and actually doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and it sounds like if you started two different clubs and you had I guess coaching or something like that turned into a business. Those are massive ways to give back, because ultimately I mean, that's why I'm doing the podcast, because this conversation that we're going to have here, somebody's going to listen to it and they're going to learn something from what you're saying. So, those are all great. And that kind of leads into the best question. How can we reach you?
You could reach me. I'm on Bigger Pockets. You can go to my website, which is synergetic.ig.com. That's SYNERGETICIG.com.
Awesome. And we'll make sure to add that in the show notes. And I'm sure you're going to have some people reaching out to you. So, Jeff, I really want to appreciate you being here today. You've really shared a lot of information about what you're doing on the multifamily side, everything from, doing student living, student housing. I think that's something to write home about, something that's blowing up or is a good investment. So it's good to see that. I appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you very much, Scott. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Have a good rest of the day. Talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, Scott.
Thanks.